Today, we are exploring In Place of Shadows by Junichiro Tanizaki, one of the Japanese most celebrated modern writers. First published in 1933, In Place of Shadows is not a novel. It is an extended essay, a meditation, a cultural reflection, a poetic argument about aesthetics, and about how modernization changes the way we experience beauty. Tanizaki was writing during the time when Japan was rapidly westernizing. Electric lights replaced the candles, concrete replaced the wood, glass and steel replaced the paper screens. Western plumbing, architecture, and interiors were becoming the standard, and Tanizaki felt something was being lost. This book is his attempt to articulate what the something is. It is not nostalgia in a simple sense. It is not anti-modern. Instead, it is a careful exploration of how traditional Japanese aesthetics evolved around the shadow, darkness, patina, texture, silence, and how Western modernity, with its obsession with brightness, clarity, and exposure, disrupts the entire sensibility. Tanizaki begins by observing a cultural difference. He writes, "The quality that we call beauty must always glow from the realities of life." He compares Western and Japanese approaches to design. In the West, modern technology was rapidly transforming interiors. Electric lighting, polished metals, white surfaces, glass and reflection. Brightness became synonymous with progress. Tanizaki, however, saw something being lost. We have lost our sense of the beauty of shadows. This is not simply nostalgia. It is a critique of a sensory shift in modernity. He argues the traditional Japanese architecture is deep, layered, and shaded. Wide eaves extended outwards, interiors are dim, light filters through paper screens. Lacquerware gleams softly in the low light. Gold leaf glows, not brightly, but mysteriously, from within the darkness. This architecture was not designed for the bright electronic illumination. It was designed for shadow. Tanizaki contrasts this with Western architecture, which increasingly prioritizes brightness, exposure, and clarity. White walls, reflective surfaces, strong illumination. In Western aesthetics, beauty often equals visibility. In traditional Japanese aesthetics, beauty emerges gradually, partially concealed. He describes how lacquer bowl becomes beautiful precisely because it reflects candlelight from darkness. If you flood it with bright light, its depth disappears. Darkness is not the absence. Darkness is a medium. This is a fundamentally different ontology of the design. Shadow creates the depth. It creates ambiguity. It invites imagination. And for Tanizaki, modern lighting technologies flatten experience. They eliminate mystery. They remove subtle gradation. In architectural terms, this is profound. Think about how contemporary architecture often celebrates transparency and openness. Compare that to the layered spatiality of traditional Japanese interiors, spaces within spaces, thresholds, engawa, deep verandas. Tanizaki is defending spatial depth, not physical depth alone, but perceptual depth. So for Tanizaki, shadow is not the absence of the light. It is a medium of the perception. He writes, light is not the dominant element. Rather, shadows are what define the space. In traditional Japanese architecture, light is always filtered through the paper screens, through deep eaves, through layered thresholds. The result is not a uniform illumination. Instead, it is a gradient of the light and the darkness. This creates depth, ambiguity, and atmosphere. The other striking ideas in place of shadows is the value of concealment. He writes, the beauty of a Japanese room depends on the variation of the shadows, and more importantly, an empty space is not empty, it is filled with the shadows. This connects to a broader Japanese aesthetic. Suggestion over explicitness, ambiguity over clarity, silence over noise. In design terms, what you do not show is as important as what you show. One of the most powerful parts of the essay concerns materials. Tanizaki writes about the beauty of the aged surfaces. Tarnished silver, darkness wood, oxidized metal. He argues that Western culture tends to polish, restore, and brighten objects, attempting to erase the time. Japanese aesthetics often embrace time. Patina is not a damage, it is a memory. A gold leaf screen inside a dim alcove does not shine aggressively. It glows softly. The darkness around it intensifies its presence. This is a relational aesthetic. Materials are not judged independently, but in relation to light conditions. And this connects directly to architecture. Modern architecture, especially post-war modernism, often pursued smooth, reflective, white surfaces. Think of the international style, think of glass curtain walls. But Tanizaki's sensibility suggests something else. Surface is not meant to be neutral. Surface is meant to interact with shadow. There is an almost environmental logic here. Traditional Japanese architecture evolved in a relation to climate, wood construction, and paper screens. Bright electric lighting and tiled bathrooms imported from the West created aesthetic dissonance. He even famously critiques modern toilets, arguing that traditional shadowed toilets in the wooden buildings created the more contemplative, atmospheric experience. In one famous passage, he describes a dimly lit, clean, and quiet space, a place of spiritual repose. It sounds humorous, but it's serious. Atmosphere shapes consciousness. Tanizaki also touches on the sound and tactility. In shadowed spaces, sound becomes more perceptible. The dripping of water, the faint echo of the footsteps, the rustle of the silk. Darkness heightens other senses. Brightness dominates vision and suppresses the nuance. This is where in place of shadows move beyond the design into philosophy. Tanizaki is suggesting that Western modernity privileges the clarity, rationality, and exposure, while Japanese aesthetics evolved around the subtlety, ambiguity, and the depth. This isn't about a spirituality, it's about a compatibility between culture and the material environment. Modernization imposes a uniform lighting, plumbing, and materials across different cultural contexts. But aesthetics are ecological. They glow from climate, building traditions, and the ways of life. When electric light enters a paper screen interior, it disrupts a centuries-old equilibrium. Tanizaki is documenting the disruption. To grasp the book message, it's important to understand the historical moment. In the early 20th century, Japan was modernizing rapidly. Western architecture, fashion, cinema, and technology were transforming cities. Tanizaki had himself been fascinated with Western culture earlier in his career, but in a place of shadow reflects a later, more critical perspective. He does not advocate rejecting electricity or modern materials outright. Instead, he mourns the disappearance of the certain aesthetical possibilities. Once a culture standardizes the brightness, it loses the sensitivity to gradation. Once surfaces are uniformly illuminated, subtle textures disappear. Once everything is visible, mystery vanishes. And mystery for Tanizaki is central to the beauty. This resonates deeply with architectural theory. As the essay progresses, Tanizaki becomes more critical. He reflects on how modernization affects Japanese culture. Had we invented the electric light, our culture might have developed differently. This is a fascinating thought experiment. Technology is not neutral. It shapes perception, behavior, and aesthetics. Tanizaki suggests that Japanese culture evolved in harmony with the shadow. Modern lighting disrupts the balance. Another key idea is the time. Shadow is not static. It changes throughout the day. It responds to sunlight, seasons, and weather. This creates a temporal dimension of the space. Modern architecture often seeks consistency, but Tanizaki celebrates the variability. Space becomes something you experience over time, not just instantly. So let's revisit some of the most important lines. Were it not for shadows, there would be not beauty. This is the core thesis. Beauty is relational. It emerges from contrast. We find beauty not in the thing itself, but in the patterns of shadows. This shifts focus from the object to perception. The sheen of the lacquerware is like that of the quiet night. This connects material to atmosphere. So why does this essay still matter? Because many of the conditions Tanizaki critiqued have intensified. Brighter screens, more artificial lighting, reflective materials, constant visibility. In contemporary architecture, glass towers dominate cities, interiors are uniformly lit, shadows are minimized. Yet at the same time, there is a growing interest in atmosphere, materiality, sensory experience. So these are key takeaways. Beauty is relational. Objects are not beautiful in isolation. Light conditions define a perception. And darkness is productive. Shadow creates a depth, mystery, and psychological resonance. And materials age beautifully. Patina in time enriches surfaces rather than degrades them. Also, atmosphere shapes experience. Design is not just functional, it is sensory and cultural. And modernization is not neutral. Technology alters perception, not just convenience. So for architects, this is very radical. It challenges the assumption that more light equals better space. It suggests that spatial quality may emerge from restraint rather than exposure. In Praise of Shadow is a short essay. You can read it in the afternoon, but its implications are vast. It reframes aesthetics from object-based to environment-based thinking. It invites us to reconsider, how do we use the light? What happens when we over-illuminate? How do materials behave in the shadow? What is lost when everything is optimized for visibility? In an age of the LED screens, high-gloss interiors, and constant brightness, Tanizaki's argument feels increasingly relevant, especially for designers, especially for architects, because architecture is fundamentally about shaping the light. Tanizaki reminds us that light is meaningful only in a contrast with shadow, and perhaps modern design culture and its pursuit of the clarity and transparency has forgotten the power of concealment. Thank you for watching and hope you will have the opportunity to read the actual text and learn more about it. And still, we're just halfway up the ladder of the knowledge of all of architecture, art, and design. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.